Hello, Matt.
Hey Graham, nice to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome, everyone, to Crazy in Love, the podcast where two therapists talk about the world of relationships. Matt, today we're going to talk about couples therapy. And a lot of couples come to see people like us, men like us, therapists like us for couples work. We're going to talk today a little bit about some of the industry barriers to men, particularly, and men of a certain political persuasion, maybe coming to couples therapists, why they're put off, why they might think that therapy and couples therapy, particularly, isn't for them. Why did you want to talk about this today? Kick us off.
Because I think there is still a hurdle and a barrier for men to overcome. So typically, in the couples that I see, it will be the woman who's reached out. Often, it's often not the guy, and sometimes, but again, nowhere near always. The guy's a little reluctant, I think, because there still exists a bit of a barrier, a bit of a taboo, a bit of a sense that no, we're going to be talking about feelings. We're going to be critical of the man's stance. You know, if he's got a kind of problem solving mentality, we're going to be tackling that. And we're going to be telling him to listen and that he needs to take, that he needs to do things which might not feel to him natural. They might not be the things that he's rewarded for at work or, the things that he enjoys doing with his friends. I think the sort of notion that we're going to get deep into feelings is quite off-putting for some men, that they're going to be regarded as sort of inferior men as inferior women, I suppose, is the misgiving that I'm trying to counter sometimes. And I think also, just final point, and then I give it back to you for your thoughts on the same question. Lots of couples choose me because I'm a guy. Like that's the
Mm.
sort of deal. That it'll be a bit safer for their male partner to come and see another guy, or that they'll get something different from a guy, or at least it reduces the initial barrier or the kind of friction to entry.
Yeah, and it's worth saying at that point, I think that I believe it's about three quarters of counselors slash therapists, probably including couples therapists, I guess, are women.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
means that
exactly.
chances are when a man or a woman is reaching out for couples therapy, chances are the bulk of the sites they'll come across on counseling directory or on a Google search are going to be women. Often those web pages do what you were just talking about, which is concentrate on the idea that therapy is a safe space to explore feelings and
Yeah,
lived experience. And I think that's the bit of it that I'd like us to draw out a little bit today, is
yeah,
how maybe the world of therapy and psychology more generally has moved from a place where it was originally focused on individual experience and individual change of personality, of behavior, to a place that has kind of tracked, particularly in the last 10 years or so, tracked a cultural shift more towards identity and valuing lived experience, and
yeah, yeah.
moved much more to talk about identity as opposed to
Yeah.
psychology.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Let's come back to that. I was just going to add also that lots of the people who do the thinking in this area, the relationship experts, so called, and therapists who've got any kind of public profile, tend to be women rather than men in this area. So the most recent examples would be Esther Perel, who I think you and I think is offering something really valuable, but it is a female perspective. Again, the couples therapy, the thing I
Mm.
think is running on the BBC at the moment, the Showtime show, is like it's a female therapist, and you sort of knew it would be. And even some of the books that are authored by men, I think sometimes I find them difficult to recommend because the voice is still quite I don't know what the best word would be, but it doesn't feel necessarily friendly to a guy working for Deutsche Bank, or coding, or doing something which is more sort of male brain, extreme male brain.
And in your experience of reading those books and watching couples therapy and just talking to other therapists, do you get the sense that when guys like that do go to couples therapy, they do get faced with something that is more about feelings? So it's not just that we're talking about what men and male clients might fear when they turn up to a couple session. They're actually getting that service, which often is kind of in the world of how each individual partner is feeling and trying to focus on validating those feelings, and almost drawing a full stop at the end of validating the feelings rather than necessarily about change within the relationship.
Yeah, I do think that. So I see lots of refugees from sort of failed couples therapy. I think often coming to me as sort of further down the line. Well, let's give this a final shot, or let's try something different. You know, having been in that more in the world that you were just describing. I mean, to be clear, I guess you and I are also all about validating the feelings, right? I think there's genuine purpose and efficacy in that. But I mean, I would say there is purpose in it. It's not for its own sake. I think it does something. It is useful, and lots of guys are talking to me about solving a problem. I would say, like, listening to somebody and validating their feelings does solve a problem. It's not the first way and the only way I describe it, but it's a legit way of describing it. How do we down regulate when we're full of too many feelings? You've got to step through that as if it were, or you can step through that as if it were a problem to be fixed.
It's rarely the end point though, is it? It's usually the starting point of any good couples work, in my experience, is both people genuinely having a chance to feel heard and have the
Yeah,
kind of conversations they probably haven't been able to have without a third party, a trained third party helping them to do it.
yeah,
But that's rarely the end point. You usually then, okay, well, what
yeah,
do we
yeah.
do with these feelings? What's the bargaining? What's the negotiation? What are you
Sure.
going to go first on trying to change? How are you going to try and prove that you've actually heard this and do something different as a result of it? If you don't go to that point, it's just, in some ways, I think you've done potentially more harm than good. You've kind of opened the Pandora's box, but not really done anything with the particularly difficult.
I agree. I agree. That would be a very typical sort of point at which I meet couples. They've done something with somebody else that was going nowhere, or that opened something up, and then I don't know, nobody in the room had the wherewithal to deal with the sort of next steps of it. You and I were listening to that conversation between Ezra Klein and Mark Epstein, who's a Buddhist therapist. And I think one of the things that I like about what Mark Epstein says about Buddhism or meditation or mindfulness more generally is it's meant to do something. Like, it's meant to create a pause point. Like, you are meant to then be able to see the thing more clearly and take an action in the world, and I think people get lost in things like meditation and mindfulness as well, and get lost in a kind of no self, or that their desires are not important or their ambitions are not important. And for me, it's a complete misread of those things. It is a skill. Like, it's a skillful practice that enables you to do something differently. Part of it is not taking yourself so seriously as a fixed self, a fixed entity, but it is also creating a kind of choice point. It is down regulating very strong feelings that can sometimes overwhelm you. There's a purpose to that. It's going to make you a better partner, a better parent. It's probably going to make you a better company, man or woman as well. If you can do that stuff, it has it has an end, it has a goal.
Another quote from that podcast conversation between Ezra Klein and Mark Epstein that I really liked was when he was talking about thoughts and feelings. And I think the phrase he used was something along the lines of, a thought or a feeling is, it's not nothing, but it's something slightly more than nothing, a little bit more than
Yeah,
nothing, something to kind of pay attention to, but not much more than that. And I think what we're saying about couples therapy is sometimes it focuses very much on making feelings everything,
yeah,
as opposed to, well, it's certainly not nothing. It's really important, particularly if those feelings haven't been validated or talked about or shared for potentially decades.
yeah, yeah.
That's your starting point, but got to go somewhere else after that. And he makes the same point with meditation, I think, that we're making about couples therapy.
Yeah, I agree. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, it doesn't tend to be all that prominent in the world of couples therapy. It's not the thing that many people necessarily think of or go to. So in individual therapy, a lot of people have heard of CBT, or somebody's advised them to get CBT, like a GP or someone in their world who knows a little bit about this. But I think it works, particularly the B bit of CBT works really well in couples therapy. Like, there's behavior, isn't there? There is a choice about how you speak to one another. If you don't lose your shit at work, right? If you don't, like, holler and scream and slam doors when a meeting goes badly or sales figures are down, then you cannot do that at home. There are clear choice points. I think people behave very badly in their relationship, and some of what I'm doing is pointing that out as well.
Is it all right if we take a slight deviation more towards politics, if
Yeah,
that's all right? Shout if it feels like we're moving in that direction too quickly. But one of the reasons I think some people are put off the world of therapy and couples therapy is it's very left leaning. So we've talked more about kind of uh, uh, problem solving CBT, more cognitive maybe approach than a feeling and validating feelings approach. But I do think there's something worth talking about that puts some men off, that therapy feels very, for want of a better phrase, left leaning, about social justice, about social activism in a way that has been a correction from the likes of Freud and Jung, where it's very much about the individual psyche. We've moved much more in the direction of social activism that I think has a lot of positives to it, but I do think puts a lot of people off.
yeah,
Would
yeah.
you agree with that? Or
Yeah, yeah, no, I would agree with that. It puts a certain type of guy off, doesn't it, for sure? I think not just guys, some women as well, but a certain type of guy is put off by that. Big chunk of my client work is, successful men who I think are definitely coming to me as somebody who might know a bit about that experience. And I think we'll find it much, much harder to go to a female therapist who is offering, for example, safe space and confidentiality and foreground in a kind of listening function. Well, they will find it hard to say some of the things they want to say in that environment. So yeah, I do think that's it's definitely a thing. Some really well-known therapists, I mean, well-known in our world rather than necessarily public figures, but they align very specifically with political parties. And I think that bit surprises me. I mean, I respect some of their work in other areas, but I'm surprised that they're so explicit and overt about where their politics line up, because I think it's sort of fundamentally unhelpful. It does seem to contradict a neutral stance in relation to a bunch of things that it might be helpful to be neutral or ambivalent about. I can't think of a single therapist who would align right or would, tilt that way. But I can think of a bunch who align themselves with political causes that are left leaning or explicitly, left wing political parties, the Labour Party in this country, for example.
and I think some of that is somewhat inevitable given the correction to consider and value the impact of reality on the psyche, on psychological, on the development of our personality, like adverse childhood experiences,
Yeah,
attachment.
yeah, yeah,
All we know about poverty and the impacts of poverty and the impacts of gender and race-based and religious-based violence on communities and individuals has to be taken into account in the development of someone's personality, right? And I think
yeah,
the
absolutely,
field of
100%.
psychology took too long to appreciate that.
Yep.
Where I think you and I would push back is the idea that we as clinicians and we as an industry and that couples therapists should be actively pushing for certain types of social change through our work
Yeah, yeah,
and doing that in public platforms. And I do think, I know we're going a bit inside baseball here, but the BACP, the president of the BACP in 2019 at a conference specifically said that social activism should be at the heart of our work. And
mm,
yet we, on the one hand, are being told that, on the other hand, are being told that we should not be advocating our own ethics or our own political values in the consulting room. So I think there is a tension there
yeah, yeah.
that hasn't really been played out in our field. And I think people can see that from the outside. They think that
More than attention, isn't it? I mean, I think it's a sort of flat contradiction. The example
yes.
you're giving there, truthfully, yeah, I'm
And you
just
can dress it up with the idea of like, obviously, the person in front of you, you need to consider like what their life has been like, the environment in which they grew up. They should come into that room knowing that their therapist has done some work to try and understand that context and appreciates that context. I think that's
yeah,
fair
but
enough.
yeah,
But
but sorry, I was trying to
I
jump in, but
think
you're not finished.
what we would both agree with is that when you do see therapists on X or on Blue Sky or on Facebook and other places proactively campaigning against, for example, disability cuts more recently by the Labour government, or more commonly protesting against the work of ICE in America, for example. But then validly they'll say, well, this affects some of my clients. A large percentage of my client base are directly affected by this.
Yeah.
But for me, that feels potentially like signaling to 40-50% of our potential client base, in effect, you're not welcome here.
I think also I just don't know what I can do about it from within the profession, from within my professional status as a psychotherapist or coach. I'm not sure that that bit is mine. I think I could fix that on another day. I could contribute a portion of my salary to it. I could take my time and use it outside of work, but it doesn't for me feel like the big calling in terms of doing, therapy, psychotherapy properly. That's not the thing that I would focus on. I would say, like, there is the link. You and I both been involved with the Bowlby Centre. You were the policy director there for a while. I was the chair there. Bowlby's big insight that sort of breaks with psychoanalysis as sort of traditionally conceived is that there's a real relationship with parents and a real relationship with the outside world. All of those things I think are um, just self-evidently true now. That we have had an actual experience in the world. Our parents were wealthy, or they argued a lot, or they were addicted, or whatever. Those things matter massively. I think going much beyond that becomes quite difficult. To think about the political context you grew up in and how that shaped you is useful to a point, but the focus of the work is what can you now change? What can you now do differently? What can you affect in your life? So I think politics is really important to me, as it is to you, and that it matters. But I'm not sure it always matters in terms of the work that I'm doing with people. Like, what's your bit of responsibility in the relationship? I know your partner is inconsiderate. I know they're hurting you in some ways. We can definitely talk about that. But what is it that you're bringing to this? What's your role in this? Why are you sticking around? Why haven't you left sooner? What have you tried? What haven't you tried? What's worked to an extent that we can build on? What doesn't work at all? Those things feel more pressing and more important and more central to the task than a discussion about, the climate crisis or anything else.
Yeah, and you're teasing out there, I think, the tension between individual agency and sort of societal shifts or societal tectonic plates that are difficult to move away from, right? That there's been quite a shift in that direction, to say that we are the the subject of things that have happened to us and where we grew
Yeah,
up, and that almost crowds out potentially individual agency and
yeah,
individual responsibility as well within that. So you mentioned CBT earlier, and I think a lot of the work of CBT is about taking responsibility to challenge some of our own ways of thinking and own ways of behaving. So we're all subject to potential biases in the way that we think. We might overgeneralize, we might go black and white thinking, and we do that in relationships all the time. Right?
yeah,
I've just literally done it myself in that sentence.
yeah, yeah,
We do it all the time, and part of couples work is to give space to, well, what might you be doing now that is slightly
yeah,
a victim of a cognitive bias, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
in the world of feelings of facts, that's hard to do. If you're saying that your lived experience is the only important thing, it's quite hard then to shift back to, well, I've got responsibility for how I respond to
yeah,
what's going on right now. I've got a responsibility
yeah.
to look inwardly at what's going on for me and to try and change that.
It feels a little bit sometimes like I've been sort of captured by victim trauma lobby. Like, I believe there is trauma in the world. I believe there are, low key things that really add up over time and create real difficulties for people that get them in a bind. But the idea that that's all it does is just not where it stops. So I buy those things, but I'm like, that's not the end of the story. So these awful things have happened to you in the way that we might say some things in our life happened to us, which we would have preferred not to. But then there are choice points about what you do about that. You take responsibility for that. It's not your fault, right? But it is your responsibility now to do something about that. You have
You
got
love that phrase. You love that phrase.
Yeah, I've got a choice in terms of what you do. So I think some of the talk about societal ills is like that this besieges us or stops us having the ability to choose or moderate or buffer those experiences. So, I mean, you can't really operate outside a capitalist
Mm,
economy. You can have thoughts about whether capitalism is the best way to run countries and economies, but we're in it, aren't we? So that's the bit that I think of as mine. Like within these constraints, within your set of experiences, within your current family, what could you do differently? And that might be leaving, but it might also be doing some things first to see whether it can be changed or shifted, or you can
mm.
protect yourself, or you can make yourself, more able to navigate that.
One of the beauties of relationships is that it is a rare space in your life where you are actually in control of quite a lot. You're in control of how you act in it. You're in control of the future of it. You're obviously not in control of your partner's responses, but you do
Um,
get to shape the future of that relationship and its
yeah,
potential ending a lot compared to how much talent you have in certain areas of your life, what sort of job you end up having, whether you're any good at football, all of the kind of things that
yeah.
we're not actually in that much control of. It is one thing that you can take some responsibility for and shape and on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's some of the pleasure of the work, isn't it? When two people in the couple can see that, and rather than one of them having dragged the other along, expecting them to get a good telling off, either administered, personally from the individual, or backed up or supported by the therapist, that we're having a two-way conversation about what needs to change and shift and what's not working for both parties. I think that's where I find the satisfaction in the work, and that is sort of the sign for me. Is it going to move? Is it going to change? Is this kind of is therapy going to be a useful moment in two people's life? Can they do something differently with that information rather than rehearse what's wrong or what's problematic?
Mm.
I think it's the thing you say sometimes, right? Your partner's not going to change that much. Can you accommodate to some of this? Can we think of it as a dimmer switch that's being turned down or turned up in relation to things that we like or don't like, rather than a kind of
Mm.
off? And sometimes I feel sometimes couples are coming in, or one or other of the couple are coming in with a view that the other person is wrong and needs to, quite fundamentally change, and that's almost never
Yeah.
the case.
So listening to a podcast of the guys. So what's the podcast name where the two guys are watching those films through the lens of the science of relationships? What's
Oh, Love
Love
Factor.
Factually? Love Factually. Yeah, and they had a really lovely concept there of relationships are likely to succeed and last where you're able to see your partner's strengths as unique to them
Yeah,
and see their faults as something that are pretty universal. That
yeah,
that pretty much everyone's going to have something that pisses you off, the way they use the
yeah,
dishwasher or the toothpaste or the way
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
how loud they eat, whatever it might be. They're going to be things about them that you don't like, but their strengths, like their strengths and the things that you love about them, they're genuinely quite hard to find in other people, certainly in the package that you have them, right? And I think that that is quite a nice framing. It's still relatively objective. You're not trying to look at the relationship through rose tinted glasses. It's just
Yeah.
this gratitude exercise, almost this gratitude mindset
Yeah.
of, rather than focusing on some of the things that couples tend to really laser focus on, in that, again, if we're using the CBT framework, we'd be saying that they've got a negative overgeneralization towards the negative, right? There's a negativity bias there that plays itself out in relationships all the time. And as humans, we probably need to repeatedly just try and nudge ourselves back towards the positives and towards gratitude.
Yeah, no, no, that's really nice. I don't want to kind of ruin that point because it feels important on its own to try and build on it. There will be something about over esteeming some things like emotional safety, which sounds like commonplace, but of course, emotional safety is very important. And, to an extent, yes, of course it is, but also you want a bit of conflict in that relationship. So sometimes the things that are um I don't know, either like a bit of a nuisance to you, you're very, very worried about, or actually you get somewhere sometimes after conflict handled well. You disagree about something, able to take the other person's perspective, soften yours, come to some sort of trade-off and compromise. It's very useful. It moves things on. Like something good can happen from that, and we're quite frightened of those things. I think that would be the other bit, to try and bring it back full circle maybe to why some guys don't want to come and do therapy because they fear it's going to be all about that, rather than can we sometimes just have an exchange about this? Am I allowed to say what I think without you getting upset, for example?
And am I allowed to do that in the couples therapy as well? Am I allowed to kind of go, this really fucking pisses me off? Am I allowed to do that? Or do I have to kind of use the therapy language in here as well?
Yeah,
And have
yeah,
to kind of
yeah.
validate everything and caveat everything before I offer my opinion?
Yeah, yeah. I use this really simple tool with clients. It's like ABC. It gets used in teaching a lot. That you agree or acknowledge is the A. That the B is that you build on that point. You know, you can think of something that sits alongside that, or you can take the point a bit further. And the C is challenge. And in the classroom, the teacher is looking for the students to always be doing one of those things. So not looking out the window, not drifting off. Are they in agreement? Are they building on the point, or do they want to come in to challenge or correct something? And in little schools, they've got the signs, they've got the A, the B, the C that they want to do. So they're always indicating where they are in the conversation. And that's some of what I'm saying to both couples, but to guys as well. It's not an opportunity to drift off or zone out. If you want to challenge it, right? Try and hear what's being said, try and acknowledge that. If you can't build on it, that's fine. Then you come in with the challenge. But the challenge is it can be done in a courteous way. It can be done in quite a clipped and concise way. It doesn't have to be like no one's giving anyone a lecture. But when we're talking, there's a back and forth, right? That we're not on the receiving end. We're either in agreement, you're right, I have got this wrong. I want to build on that. I do it on other occasions as well. And I really would like to alter that. Or I don't think this is fair. I think this is being overstated and I want to challenge back. So it's I guess, a more engaged process
Mm,
than just that kind of, I don't know. I mean, it is a version of active listening, but active listening has almost become like you just hear what someone else is saying for as long as they
yeah,
want to say it for, and you
yeah,
don't really offer anything in
yeah,
response. And that feels to me like, absolute
yeah.
nonsense, really.
Just a slightly endless recapitulation of what someone has said to you using their words back at them, which can feel very robotic and very artificial, I think.
And it can lead to really long conversations as well. I talk to couples and they've had like they'll have hours long sort of debates or deeply emotional or frankly just upsetting and unpleasant, sometimes unkind conversations that go on and on and on. And I'm like, okay, have we acknowledged this and accepted the point? Have we found any ways of building on this and making it a shared thing? And are we challenging on some points? And that, I mean, I doubt that would need to go on for more than about 20 minutes, in my own mind and in my own life. I'm like, why is this taking so long? Somebody's delivering a lecture, someone's zoned out, right?
Someone's trying to persuade. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, or yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. But also, it's a bit hectoring, isn't it? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, I've landed the
Yeah.
point. If you
Yeah.
heard it, I really don't need to repeat it. But let
Yeah.
me know you've heard it.
Yeah.
Let's agree what the
Yeah.
action is that we're
Yeah.
going to tolerate it,
And
or
if you disagree, then we just need to draw the line there, at least for tonight, right? I've said something, you
sure.
disagree with it. What are we going to do? Just say the same thing to each other 100 times, or are we going to
Yeah.
try and draw the line there? Yeah, agreed.
So I guess we think the process of therapy is maybe a bit more robust
Yes.
than how it appears in the common conception. And I think couples therapy, the show that's on BBC and Esther Perel, are both very good at doing that when they get that right. Like their practice is, I think is challenging and confronting. That the reason I sort of like those shows and think they're helpful to us who kind of make our living this way is they show people that therapy has got a kind of tough edge as well, even though it's done in quite a skillful way. And they're both, very feminine exponents of that. They are actually surprisingly tough when you listen
I
in to
agree.
what's going on. I would just like to see some male role models, doing that as well. Some, some men being able to offer the challenge and reframe things and recast things, because I think we haven't got great models of that, and that for me feels like like very much in the wheelhouse of masculinity.
Any TV producers listening, that was
Oh
Matt's.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, maybe for you, I'm more of a face for radio, I think, Graham, or podcasting.
Oh, we'll let our viewers on YouTube make
Yeah,
sure
they do.
sure they're
Can you do a poll, maybe?
yeah. Good stuff. Do we leave it there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice to talk to
Yeah.
you.
Good to talk to you. Speak soon.